There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped in 10th and Ranch, Michael Byler.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon with 27 years of service. And with me tonight, I know you guys are not going to believe this. It's almost too good to be true. That handsome fella in front of that flag is retired NYPD police officer and current defense attorney, Joe Murray. How you doing, Joe?
Good to see you, Bill. Yeah, great. I'm glad you're feeling better with your surgery.
Yeah, it's a slow process, but I'm getting there. You know, I'm a fighter. I'm losing weight. You know, I'm not supposed to drink any alcohol, so that alone I'm losing weight. You know, because I'm like a 1 or 2 glass of wine a night guy, and that's cut out completely. So look, dropping weight's not a bad thing. You know,
that's not bad.
We can all afford, right? We can all afford to lose a couple of pounds.
Are you back doing your spinning yet, or no? It's too much.
No, I'm not even close. I'm walking with a cane right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wow. So it's, I'm still having a pretty fair amount of pain. So yeah, I'm hoping 3 weeks, 4 weeks in, I'll get back. But yeah, right now I'm in a little bit of pain, but anyway, last night we had really a spectacular show. A fella named Dylan Rounds, a 19-year-old gentleman from Utah, who was a farmer. He's missing, from that area, and we had his mom come on last night, and it's just a heartbreaking case. His mom's a super lady, and the fact that she just held it together as we spoke about this case is just a credit to her. She's a very strong woman, and I don't have anything new to talk about tonight with her, or else I would have brought or asked her to come back on, but we're going to continue to monitor that case and see if there's any new developments. However, there are some new things in the Uvalde, and not smoking gun new, but the Uvalde school shooting case. And of course, this has been disturbing from minute one. And I never like when the press calls cops cowards. Just doesn't sit well with me. And I will tell you right now, even knowing what I know right now, there's not a single cop on that scene that was a coward. All right. There was a whole configuration of bad decisions, of bad things that went on, but there's not a single cop. And I'd like to challenge any broadcaster from behind his safety of his desk and his television studio to call one of those cops a coward, because they're not cowards. Exactly. And again, Joe, we had Bill Bratton weighed in on this case, Ed Davis from Boston, some of the top police minds in the country weighed in on it. And almost, at least the top leaders said, this wasn't the problem of lack of training or response. It was a problem of leadership. And the person making the call on the scene made the wrong call. And it's as simple as that. And I know people don't want to accept that. I don't think I would want to accept that either if one of these little kids was my son or my daughter, I'm going to play a little bit of some of the updates on this from ABC News, and we'll take a listen to this.
Okay.
Happened, raising questions about how law enforcement responded. The rampage continued for 77 minutes before officers killed the shooter. Using a timeline from Texas Department of Public Safety Director Stephen McCraw, mapping, and additional footage from the scene, here's what we know so far. In some cases, timing is approximate. Shortly after 11 a.m. on May 24th, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos allegedly shot his 66-year-old grandmother in the face at their home. At 11:28, the gunman crashed into a ravine near Robb Elementary. A teacher outside witnessed the crash and went inside to get her phone. Ramos then allegedly exited the car and opened fire on 2 people outside the funeral home across the street. Neither was injured, according to McCraw. At 11:30, the teacher went back outside to call 911 and report the crash. But while speaking to the dispatcher, she saw a man approaching the school with a gun. She ran inside and closed the door behind her, thinking it would lock automatically, the teacher's lawyer told ABC News.
That door is supposed to always be locked. She runs into a classroom right to her right. That's when she starts to hear pop, 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 just really fast.
A minute later, Ramos allegedly jumped over a fence and moved towards the school while firing at the building. Meanwhile, a Uvalde school district officer who heard the call arrived at the school.
That officer drove immediately to the area, sped to what he thought was the man with a gun, to the back of the school, which turned out to be a teacher and not the suspect. In doing so, he drove right by the suspect, who was hunkered down behind a vehicle, where he began shooting at the school.
Soon after, Ramos entered the school through the same door on the building's northwest side, which was closed but unlocked, according to Texas DPS, who confirmed the account from the teacher's attorney. From there, he walked 20 to 30 feet through the school, turned right down a hallway, and entered either classroom 111 or 112, which are connected. About a minute before the gunman entered the building, an employee triggered an internal alert system. A spokesperson for Raptor Technologies, the company that makes the app, told ABC News.
At 11:33, the suspect begins shooting into room 111 or 112. It's not possible to determine from the video angle that we have at this point in time that he shot more than 100 rounds based on the audio evidence at that time.
2 minutes later, 3 Uvalde officers entered the school, soon followed by 3 more and a deputy county sheriff, while other officers surrounded the building, according to McCraw.
The 3 initial police officers that arrived went directly to the door, and 2 received grazing wounds at that time from the suspect.
And people began to gather outside the school. At 11:58, some students were seen exiting through the windows.
Somebody jump out the window.
Oh, the kids. They're getting the kids out.
I'm ready. I have to.
At 12:03, more officers entered the school and met in the hallway, bringing the total number of law enforcement in the building up to 19. While this happened, someone made an 83-second 911 call from inside room 112. The same person called back less than 10 minutes later, reporting that multiple people were dead, McCraw said.
We have a child the room 12. Are we able to? Is there anybody inside of the building at this? Child is advising he is in the room full of victims at this moment.
At 12:16, the same caller in room 112 called back again to report that some students were still alive, according to McCraw.
8 to 9 children.
At that time, U.S. Border Patrol Tactical Unit was on the scene with shields and other equipment.
At 12:21, suspect fired again, was believed to be at the door. Law enforcement moved down the hallway.
The 911 caller in room 112 asked for police to be sent in, making the same request a few minutes later, according to McCraw. At 12:50 p.m., 80 minutes after the teacher's first 911 call, tactical officers entered the room using keys from a janitor. They shot and killed the gunman in room 111, sources told ABC News. The incident was the worst mass shooting at an American public school in nearly a decade, and has left many wondering whether officers acted appropriately. In March of this year, local law enforcement in Uvalde received training in ways to respond to a situation like this. Local law enforcement has changed its account of the events multiple times since the incident.
There was a brave Consolidated Independent School District resource officer that approached him, engaged him.
It was reported that a school district police officer confronted the suspect that was making entry. Not accurate. He walked in unobstructed initially.
3 days after the shooting, McCraw said that officers waited to enter the room because they believed that the active shooter situation had ended.
Obviously, based upon the information we have, there were children in that classroom that were at risk, and it was, in fact, still an active shooter situation. And for the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was a wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that.
Law enforcement is investigating why the school door didn't lock. The Justice Department is currently reviewing law enforcement's response.
Joe, what do you think there?
Yeah, that's a great timeline. I'm glad they put that together. I know it was tough getting the details out initially, but what I'd like to see is where when they say there were 19 officers in that corridor, like where were the intelligence of and command and control? Like who was in charge? Who was directing these officers?
Joe, I think there lies where the biggest mistake was made, is that I believe a chief named Pete Arredondo, who was the school chief, who was in charge of 6 officers, somehow he was in charge at this scene. And I don't understand how that is a possibility when that's a small little department. The local department is a much bigger department, probably more training in this type of thing. How did it happen that he was the one that was left in charge of this situation? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We had Patrick Ryder on from the Nassau County Police, who's a commissioner, who's a very, very impressive guy.
Sure.
And we discussed this case with him. And one of the things was that, when I say he's a great guy, he's a great guy. He doesn't want to criticize any other cops. And I understand that. And, from what we do here, we more or less have to critique it a bit. We're not on the police department anymore. We need to critique it. Let me put this video on here. We'll give you a little bit of an idea of what was going on there.
Chief Pete Arredondo has been facing nonstop criticism for how he responded to Robb Elementary on that day when 19 students and 2 teachers were killed. Now, for the first time, he's speaking out about that response to the Texas Tribune. He says he's proud of his actions on that day and that they likely saved lives. Uvalde CISD Police Chief Pete Arredondo breaking his silence weeks after DPS officials publicly blasted the decision not to storm the classroom sooner.
It was a wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that.
Chief Arredondo spoke to Texas Tribune reporters James Barragan and Zach Despart.
He stands by his conduct that day.
Arredondo defending his actions. He was one of the first officers to arrive on scene. He entered the school with only his Glock pistol, no body armor, assuming he could have died, and made the decision to leave both radios behind, saying, quote, it would slow him down.
He was worried that he wouldn't be able to have both of his hands free to use his pistol in the event he needed to shoot the gunman. Police experts that we talked to were really dumbfounded by this decision.
It left Arredondo unable to learn of 911 calls coming from children stuck inside the classroom with the gunman. Arredondo says he and a group of officers immediately took fire when they approached the locked classroom, with bullets piercing the classroom door. Officers retreated into the hallway where Arredondo called for tactical gear, a sniper, and keys to open the locked classroom. I was praying one of them was going to open the door each time I tried a key, Arredondo told the Tribune.
It took the police more than 40 minutes to get the right key to open the door, and that's what made the shooting last so long.
At one point, the chief says he tried talking to the gunman through the walls to build a rapport, but he didn't respond. 77 minutes after officers first arrived at the school, they entered the classroom and shot the gunman dead. Tonight, Arredondo adamant he did not consider himself the incident commander on scene.
He never retreated to assume any sort of command role. He never gave any orders to anyone, and he certainly never ordered any police not to go in as soon as they could to confront the gunman.
Arredondo's account raising more questions about the police response and if a delay in leadership contributed to more lives lost that day.
Chief Arredondo is only one piece of the puzzle. We were glad to put that piece in, but there are many more to come.
And we did try to speak to Chief Arredondo's attorney tonight, but we're told he's not doing any on-camera interviews. He did stress, however, that Chief Arredondo continues to receive death threats and has since gone into hiding, but does remain committed to assisting in any ongoing investigation.
Phil, you're here. We're getting some new information, and one of the things that I know you told me this evening is that they're saying that the door to the classroom was never locked, period.
Yeah. First, I want to say hello to Joe. Joe,
hey,
haven't
Billy.
talked to you in a while. How you doing? Hope
Good.
all is well. Billy started out the show. I was listening to it on my way into the office here. You pointed out that there were no cowards that day. Shortly after this incident took place, I had gone to a barbecue that weekend, and the first words out of someone at the barbecue's mouth when I walked in was, "Oh, those cops were afraid to go in." I doubt that was the case. those guys were taking gunfire. There was a lot of mistakes made. Granted, I give a lot of credence to that. But I think that what you said, Billy, there were no cowards that day. That's something that, you're faced with certain death if you go up against that door. So they had to do it tactically. They were waiting for the keys, supposedly. But now, as you said, Bill, today, there were reports that that door either malfunctioned or was unlocked at the time. That the report that I heard was that he was unable to lock the door from the inside due to a malfunction, or the door just didn't lock from the inside. Whatever the case was, I would think that it was a malfunction, because normally schools will have hardened doors that will lock from the inside in case an intruder does come into the building. So that was one of the concerns. And they also said that the door that he entered in, the building, that school teacher took a lot of heat. The one that was outside saw the crash, ran inside to get her phone to call 911, came back out. There were reports initially that she left the door wide open with a chair. Then it was some type of an instrument that blocked the door. Was not true. She pulled that door. Today, there's a report that that door also did not lock for some reason. It's supposed to lock when it's pulled closed. She pulled it closed. She did the right thing. She took a lot of heat, that teacher, and they're saying that that wasn't the case. So there's another report that the Attorney General of the state is holding back details on, because the quote was, and it was from an unnamed source, that it's too embarrassing to release the details at this time because of pending litigation and lawsuits against the state. So again, it sounded like,
Phil, I was referring to the door going into the classroom.
Yeah.
That, they made a big deal out of getting 40 minutes to get the keys. From what I'm hearing now, the door was not locked, that they could have opened it without any keys.
That's exactly right. That's the report that I heard earlier today. The door was not locked. Whether or not they knew that is unclear. I don't think they would have waited for keys for 40 minutes.
But Phil, that shows that no one tried the door.
Yeah, that does indicate that to me too as well. And again, they did say, if you paid attention to that last report, that as soon as they went to the door, there were shots coming through the door. I think there were 2 deputies that were grazed in the initial stages. That was in the first few minutes. So again, they pulled back, and I get it. Once you start getting fire and you want to take cover maybe, and you want to back up a little bit, and it doesn't sound like there was continuous gunfire through that whole period of time. Now, we do know that there were calls from inside the classroom, and this is the heartbreaking, the heart-wrenching part, saying that yes, there were some students injured and killed, but there were students that were alive, and at the end of it, those students didn't make it out. So it's really heart-wrenching. I don't know, he's saying that he didn't consider himself the incident commander at the time. He was calling the shots.
All right, we know there's a million mistakes made on the scene. He's not owning up to being the boss. Joe Murray, you're an NYPD cop. You've been involved in heavy situations, gunfire, all that stuff. Maybe you could explain to the people in the chat how time just slows down. And it's not so simple to say, oh, this guy's a coward, this guy did this wrong, this guy did that wrong. There's many, many Monday morning quarterbacks, And Joe, why don't you want to just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for us, from our experiences, to share that, to just call these officers cowards is, in my opinion, it's just reckless and it's an uncalled for. At least at this point, I don't see that. You and I know, both of you guys, when you respond to a scene like that, even a crisis situation, even like Tompkins Square Park in 1988, we had that riot in Tompkins Square Park. The duty captain put over the radio an 85 forthwith in the entire city. Cops were coming from everywhere. It's not an organized response. It's not something, where you're directed every move you make. So everyone is going there with the intelligence they're getting over the radio as to how best to address this and what area to approach from. So I'm disappointed that this is the chief of the school police, right? That's their jurisdiction, the schools. This is what they were in charge with. He went out the radio. I understand that his desire to move quickly, keep his hands free, and be able to take whatever action necessary. That's far from cowardice. leaving his radio behind. I don't know if he could have stuck it in his pocket or somewhere. I don't know if they have the holders that we had, but certainly moving quickly was on his mind. It appeared to be that way. And the fact that he could have been shot didn't seem to be an issue. But once he got inside, and it was a more complex situation because they were trying to figure out, I would also anticipate that going inside and hearing these shots ringing out, in a school, it's not exactly clear where it's coming from. Are you hearing the gunshot, the muzzle fire, or the ricochets, or glass breaking? When he first got there, he was moving from class to class and shooting into the windows. You're getting intelligence from the people you encounter as soon as you walk in. So I'm sure it was a very confusing situation when they were walking in. You want to move quickly, and it always happens. And sometimes after the incident, we talk to each other about the crossfires we were in, pointing guns at each other. It's a little chaotic when you're responding to a heavy job like that. And people, it's a misnomer that everything is so organized and put together. And I think it's unfair to really throw this at them until we really know what happened.
Joe, one of the things I just want to bring up is that I don't think there's a possibility that an active shooter can turn into a hostage situation. I don't think it's the kind of situation where you could say that's what happened. And initially, that was the information that was being put out there. An active shooter is an active shooter, and you treat it as such until he's stopped. And he's either stopped by law enforcement killing him, his victims attacking him, or usually happens many times that he commits suicide. And in this instance, go ahead,
Bill,
Joe.
I disagree a little bit. And hear me out on this. Ordinarily, an active shooter in a school, you're thinking right away, this is someone who's just going to keep firing until either he's killed or he's killed everyone and ran out of ammunition. That's what you're thinking. But as you're going in there, you're using all your senses. Maybe the firing stopped, and now you hear yelling, screaming. I can imagine the kids must have been terrified and screaming and yelling, and not hearing any more shots could lead you to believe that something happened. Either someone attacked the shooter or the shooter is taking hostages. So I don't necessarily rule that out yet. I mean, it's entirely possible in a chaotic situation as you're approaching and getting closer to that, classroom 111, 112, you're hearing things going on. Naturally, you want to hear for the gunshots, but you're hearing other stuff, yelling, screaming, directions being yelled out or screamed out. Maybe they thought it was the shooter directing people, get in that classroom, move over there. So I'm not able to really make that leap yet. I mean, I think it is possible that it could have been perceived to be a hostage situation.
I have to agree with Joe on that, Bill. Just give me a second. I don't mean to interrupt, but I got to agree with you, Joe, because if things played out the way they played out in this situation, those kids were alive for a period of time. So it wasn't continuous shootings. Now, when we had Patrick Ryder on, the police commissioner in Nassau County, he told us that on the average, these shootings take 2 to 3 minutes. Response time is 3 to 5 minutes. So most of these shootings happen in 2 to 3 minutes, meaning the person enters the school, begins shooting. He shoots until either he's stopped or he runs out of bullets or commits suicide, whatever. The average is about 2 to 3 minutes. So there was a period of time where, all right, bullets are coming through the door. They pulled back. Now the shooting stopped. Don't forget, too, you pointed out some really good points there, Joe, about what was going on inside the school. Outside the school, parents were coming from all different directions, as I did when there was a alleged active shooting in my daughter's high school about 5 or 6 years ago. So I really get it. We went to the scene, and by that time, everything was calmed down. But so you had all the moving parts of what was going on outside, chaos, waiting for reinforcements, waiting for equipment. The fact that he did not take his radio with him, I cannot agree with that one bit, because if he's going in, he needed to communicate. We need an ambulance. We need medics. We need this. That was a mistake, not taking a radio. I cannot forgive him for that one. He wanted to move quickly. He didn't want to be weighed down. Okay. But The radio, stick it in your pocket. Even if you lay it down next to you, you have to have access to communication to whoever else is responding. Suppose the shooter goes running out the back door. You're not going to radio. He's coming out the back door. You know what I mean? So I can't forgive him for that. Joe, you're making great points that, if there's a shooting and a guy goes into a school and he starts shooting and then he says, wait, hold on, I want to, if you come in, I'm going to kill more of them, that becomes a hostage situation. I don't think that happened in here. It sounded like he wasn't communicating, but the shooting did stop. They were trying to make contact with him. So again, him perceiving it as a hostage situation, I could see that.
Let me play a little bit of this. This is about the changing information we got.
Left 21 dead and 17 wounded. In the days following, authorities gave differing accounts of what happened, raising questions about how law enforcement responded. The rampage continued for 77 minutes before officers killed the shooter. Using a timeline from Texas Department of Public Safety Director Stephen McCraw, mapping, and additional footage from the scene, here's what we know so far. In some cases, timing is approximate. Shortly after 11 a.m. on May 24th.
I'm not going to go through that whole timeline, but we just know that many things changed since it first happened. The information changed. Part of the problem, I would also say, is that in the very early stages of this, the police didn't do a good job of getting the information out. They put out a lot of incorrect information, and that leads the public to believe that you're not competent at your job. They had initially said that a school safety officer had confronted the gunman. There was not even a school safety officer working that day. So that made the public believe that things weren't, they weren't doing a good job in getting the information out there. There was information that the teacher opened the door and left it propped open. That never happened.
Right.
And apparently she closed the door and it's supposed to automatically lock it, never locked. Officers did apparently exchange gunfire with the shooter. I don't know if that was in fact reported, but there was some heroes in this incident, as well as people that may be considered not acting properly. But there was some heroes in this incident.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
It's definitely a difficult situation. I agree with you 100%, Philly. The radio is your lifeline. You get description, direction of flight. There's just so much. And I don't understand him. I don't know. I mean, we had those, you remember the clip, you turn it upside down, you put it in. Like we had a way to lock our radio in so it was with us all the time. And you turn it up and you're listening, but I don't know. Maybe he was concerned for the gunman to hear the radio. He was trying to approach in a more stealth way. I don't know, but I think it was a mistake not having the radio. Going to your point, Bill, about the confusion and the bad communication of the timeline and events, it's hard to really put that on them because, yes, you're 100% correct, but in our situation, were this the NYPD, we are the force that responds there, and our communications are unified. We had a small 6-member department there. We had another agency come in, Homeland Security came in, another agency. So with that many different departments and issues going on, I can see how there would be, there's no unified chain of command between all the officers there. It is chaotic to begin with, and the desperation to get information out right away led to mistakes. And sadly, you really have to be careful with that, because when people find that you've misstated something, they're less likely to trust what you say the second time or the third time, and it really does a lot of damage. And all of our critics are out there saying we're doing this on purpose to try to cover up. That's the first thing that will be yelled, and called out. So it's so critically important to make sure you get that information and do it in a timely and accurate way.
when you report inaccurate facts, Joe, that leads to public distrust, 100%.
Yeah.
But I want to make a comment about the radio. Now, that radio to me, I always had it in my left hand, my non-gun hand, that if I ever had to reach for my firearm, like you said, it was the lifeline. And it also served as a weapon. Now, I worked in a suit and tie a lot. A lot of my years, I was an investigator. I was in the squad. So I wasn't carrying a nightstick. I didn't have readily available tools to fight with. So that radio was that for me. And I just can't see that. One other point I want to make too, to fire a barrage of bullets inside the door of that classroom in the early stages could have been construed as very, very dangerous because there were children inside. Now, I don't think that they had communication with that 911 caller, which that was probably one of the mistakes that were made. Maybe the information wasn't being transported or direction given back. If they're in the back of the room, let them stay towards the back, in case they breach the door and make an entry. I don't know what transpired there, but that was a very, very important asset. If you have communication inside a barricaded gunman's lair, he's inside the classroom and you have communication with someone, that was an extremely important asset at that moment. That's an important tool. It doesn't seem like it was utilized, and I don't think that the communication was transmitted to the people that were outside the classroom or on the scene or whoever was making the decisions. I could be wrong on that, but it doesn't sound like it.
Yeah.
Going back to Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder from Nassau County, I had brought up the aspect that in the NYPD, the person in charge, and he reminded me of this, could be a police officer. It's the highest ranking Patrol Services Bureau officer on the scene at that time.
Yeah.
So if the highest ranking guy is a police officer, guess what? He's in charge until he's relieved by the next highest ranking from Patrol Services.
Yeah, uniform.
So, a police officer could have made the decision to go in. So, that's one of the things I think is good in the chain of command with the NYPD is that there's no doubt of who is in charge. And just that little scenario we mentioned right there is that it could be as lower rank than that, and not to put down the rank of police officer. It's a admirable rank. It's where everyone starts out. But an experienced 20, 25-year police officer has all that knowledge and all that experience at his disposal. So that person could be the one making that decision.
But I still think, Bill, when you're responding to a shooting incident like this, you're not looking for someone to give you orders. You're reacting. You're taking the building. You're looking at where resources are going. I hated it. A lot of times I would see cops one behind the other running after each other. You know what? You guys go that way. I'm going to go this way. But police officers do that. They're not just robots, and they'll react to certain things. And you don't need a boss to say, hey, all right, there's enough guys approaching from this side. How about send some of the other side? You kind of figure it out. So I'm not that, 77 minutes is a very long time. At some point, there should have been some clear direction given about tactically how to address this. But initially, the officers arriving on the scene, they're not looking for anyone to give them orders. They're responding. They're looking to identify the shooter, how many shooters, what the situation is. And you're 100% right, Philly. Having someone on the inside calling 911 calling twice, why that information was not, given and conveyed to the officers who are responding, or at least somebody to have contact with them, and speak to them directly.
Linda Uribe in the chat asks the question, a cop's wife. So why was he the chief? What good was he? Well, we questioned as why was the chief of a 6-man department in charge at a major incident like this? We question why that was done, and for sure, I want to play a little bit of Bill Bratton, who critiques this incident.
No, what's your assessment here?
Well, a lot of what we're dealing with really, as you know, is speculation at this stage, because law enforcement in Texas has been an embarrassment in terms of the information they've been providing. The misinformation that have been provided. I teach this in terms of communications in times of crises. And you always start off with the information as preliminary, subject to change. The information they've been putting out now 2-3 days after the event has been an embarrassment because there was so much misinformation. So we really don't know at this stage what happened in those first 12 minutes, that first hour. But we do know is that there seems to have been a violation of the basic tenet of active shooters, which is that you move to the shooter. No matter what, you move to the shooter to save lives. And officers around the country since Columbine now for 30 years have trained to do that. We're going to need to find out in the days and weeks ahead, did this department train for it? Did they in fact do it? I'm now reading news stories about some individual officers who effectively did do that in that school. What's also missing here, really, even 4 days into this event, is there's no schematic about this school. This is not one building. It is multiple buildings, multiple classrooms in multiple buildings. So they should be able to, at this stage, to basically explain, what does this building look like? Where were officers? Where was the shooter? The confusion. Everybody was killed in one classroom. We now find there may be as many as 4 classrooms this individual was roaming through. No, there's just so many unanswered questions, but at this stage of the game, they should be doing a much better job than they have been doing to try and explain what they do know. And it's a mess. It's an absolute mess.
Joe, comment?
Yeah, he's right about that. It's an absolute mess that 2 or 3 days after, and you're still giving out misinformation. There's no excuse for that. But certainly immediately and the day of and immediately thereafter, it's understandable, but he's absolutely right. Preliminarily, this is what we know. That should have been what was said instead of, just giving out facts. But this is such a horrible situation. I can't reiterate the officers responding. He said everyone goes right to the shooter, active shooter. I'm sure that was happening. But look at that labyrinth of the classrooms. There were buildings next to each other. How do you know where the shots are coming from when you're in that kind of environment, And you have to also remember there's nothing about a gunshot that tells you, oh, that's a cop shooting, oh, that's a bad guy shooting. You don't know who's firing the shots. You don't know how many shooters there are. There's a lot of, information you don't have, but you're acting instinctively, going towards the shooter, looking for the bad guy. And then on that point, what does the bad guy look like? Unless you've gotten that information over the radio, you don't yet know. Everyone is the bad guy at that point until you verify they're not the bad guy.
John Riesinger in the chat. Yes, they're trying to cover it up from the governor on down. Those kids deserve the truth. Please don't let their lives be in vain. John, what we're trying to do here is to dissect what happened and to shine a spotlight on it and to get the truth out there. I and Phil and everyone that's been on this show, we've been highly critical of it. And we brought in, Patrick Ryder, one of the top experts in the nation on this. And he has a brilliant active shooter program out in Nassau County that should probably be the model for the whole nation. And rather than all these politicians going around talking about, gun control and all this other stuff, they should bring a guy like him to speak in front of Congress and talk about his active shooter program for Nassau County that can be maybe utilized for the entire nation.
Hey, Joe, there was an app that they developed, and he had all the teachers in the schools in Nassau County downloaded into their phone. When they hit that app, they activate it. It tells the exact location of where they are in the school. And he had all the school rooms numbered from outside. So now when the police are responding, if they go to a window and they see number 12, and that's the room that they're supposed to be going into, they know that that's the room where the shooting is taking place. So that in and of itself should be a national policy across the nation. Every school in the country, every teacher, we all have cell phones now, should have that app downloaded into their phone. And it's very, very accurate because of the technology of cell phones today. So again, now you have a person activating, they can text or they can talk to give information on where this active shooter is or whatever the threat is. So that right there in and of itself is something that should be instituted across the nation. That probably, if that was in this school in Uvalde, would have saved lives.
Let me play a little bit of Patrick Ryder.
Lives. Slow the shooter down, get the cops there faster, and know the environment you're about to go into and where you're going to go. That's how you save lives. If you start whipping out plans and cameras, even the cameras, they say, oh, you should have access to our cameras. And by the time I turn it on, if the internet connects and you didn't change the password on me, because with that many buildings, that happens every day, right? I'm not going to be able to keep up with that. You heard Bill Bratton say, go to the shooter, take the shooter out, and then we'll deal with the rest. So slow him down, control access, locking doors, cameras, ballards in front of the building if it's a car, all of those things in place, knowing where to hide, practice and drill like you do in the building. You know, now they're going around and they're selling this stuff where smoke's going to come out of the ceiling and phase out. That's a bunch of crap. All of that is crap.
Commissioner, what is that called again? An EVAP system, you said?
The smoke out of the ceiling?
No. The thing that you said that all the Nassau County.
It's a rave app.
Rave app.
Yep, and it's just like any app on the phone. And when we visit the school, we pick the teachers who are going to have it by where they work in the building.
How is this not throughout the country? This is something you made the greatest point that most shootings are going to take place in 2 to 3 minutes, 75%, and you have a system that might
3 to 5. Phil, you weren't listening.
No, he said the shootings 2 to 3 minutes. The response is 3 to 5. So we want to speed up the response, and that right there would bypass 911, and the officer sees that. He's dropping what he's doing. He's getting to that school, and that might save lives. I mean, that's something that Democrats and Republicans should get together on. That could be implemented in days. I mean, that should be a national mandatory thing in every school. Now, real quick about the schools. Now, the schools in my area. Now, my wife works in a school. I'm not going to say where, but she works in a middle school, and they have the doors, like you said, Commissioner. They have a door that's a person will ring the buzzer. They'll see them on camera. They'll speak to them first. They come through one door, and then they get buzzed into a second door. So that's something I think every school should have as well. Most of them do. My daughter's high school has it. The school my wife works in middle school has it. But this other thing I think is probably something even better because it's going to get the cops there quicker.
So that's Nassau County Commissioner Patrick Ryder. Brilliant program, a program that should be brought nationally to every school in the country. And, we recommend that he go speak in front of Congress rather than these politicians going around trying to just develop more and more hatred like they do all the time so that they can remain in power. That's all. That's my take on politicians. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, give us a thumbs up. If you want to support us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And if you want to become part of our YouTube family, you can see the folks with the green font in the chat. They're part of our YouTube family where we have 5 different levels. I just want to mention something about, I know there's a lot of hatred toward the cops in Texas. There's a lot of, look, there's a lot of things went wrong there. I can't defend the things that happened. I don't think anyone can. Some of the top police experts in the nation were highly critical. But now we got to pick up the pieces and move forward. And that's very much important. And Joe, I wanted to mention like some truths are coming out. Look, 3 weeks, 4 weeks after this incident happened, it's going to move to a phase of undoubtedly a civil case. And of course, no one wants to talk about that, but there's going to be gigantic lawsuits. I would imagine that after the smoke clears in this, they will probably knock this school down. I can't see them going back into that school. They did that at Sandy Hook. Schools that have had these horrendous active shooter cases, many times they knocked the school down. Joe, if you can just talk about a little bit about, getting the truth out, because all of this is going to wind up at some point 2 or 3 years down the road in a civil case.
Yeah, it's so important to get the facts and get the truth out. And, from our job, the GO15 process and interviewing everyone, it's all going to happen. It's all happening now where, just methodically, whatever investigative body they have, doing this investigation, I think the feds are coming in now to oversee that internal investigation. It's going to be very methodical, get the roll call. Who was there? Who was working? Who responded first? Who got there? Whatever technology they have. They may even have GPS tracking, of their cars or radios. So I think it's going to come out. It's going to be done. I've heard the federal government now is overseeing this investigation, but it'll be very methodical. They'll go through each person, interview them. They'll compare, the information they receive, see if it corroborates, and we will find the answers.
Yeah, unbelievable. Phil, I just want to go quickly to since he's here, he's going to track that whether we do this or not.
Live and in the fresh, we have Joe Murray tonight. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of the fence. His website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you could email Joe at joe@jmurray-law.com. Highly recommended as a criminal defense attorney. Joe Murray, live and in the flesh.
Folks, these cases, of course, they happen too often right now, of course, these active shooter cases. But I think politically we're losing faces to or what is an active shooter. There was a shooting last night in Harlem in which 9 people were shot. 1 was killed. That doesn't fit the definition of an active shooter case. And we'll find out more as the investigation goes forward. That may have been a dispute. There may have been several guns. We don't know yet. It's too early on in the investigation. But we need the definition of what an active shooter is and how we respond to it and how we investigate it has to remain, the way it was investigated from the very beginning. And an active shooter is defined as a certain set of norms with it. Someone that goes in and has no other reason but to shoot people and doesn't stop until he's stopped. That's an active shooter.
Absolutely, Billy. I think the incident in Harlem doesn't sound like it was an active shooter situation. I believe it was some kind of an event and there was rival gangs or whatever it was. There was some kind of a dispute that led to that shooting last night. But, the federal standard for mass shooting is, I believe, 3 or 4 people injured in a shooting is considered a mass shooting. But I think you made the real point, Billy. That's the pinpoint, is when a person goes into a location, whether it be a school, a hospital, a post office, whatever it is, with the intent on causing mayhem and killing people, and they just go on this rampage until they either commit suicide or are stopped. And to me, that's what I consider a mass shooting. When you have these street gangs getting involved in rival gun battles, that is more of a gang problem as opposed to...
Well, Phil, that's why I'm saying it, because I don't want the politicians to steal this definition for their own purposes.
Yes, exactly.
Which I don't know if you heard, but in New York, they just keep passing new gun legislation that has nothing to do with stopping gun gangbangers. They just added to the law that you're not allowed to own body armor. They just
micro encrypting bullets. I mean, what is that going to do? Like the bad guy's going to worry about what's written on the bullets when they're firing them. They're pulling out guns in front of police stations and firing shots like it's nothing, like the Wild West. So these laws are targeted towards law-abiding citizens, and we need to target the criminals. That's the problem in this country. The politicians don't want to target the criminals. We go through it all the time: bail reform, no stop, question, and frisk, on and on we go, and then decarceration. We could go on all night. We know the story. It's been going on for a few years. We see the mayhem in the streets. The criminal element and the crime statistics are just skyrocketing, and they want to put micro encrypting on bullets. How is that going to stop anything? That's not going to stop the bullets from being loaded into a gun and fired. That's
Phil, it's just like, that whole expression, let's make a smoke screen. Maybe they won't see through it.
Yeah.
Let's act like we're doing something by passing laws that have no effect on what the real problem is. And I know, Joe, you follow this greatly because you ran for Queens District Attorney, and this stuff is sickening. And it's these people up in Albany, they're worse and worse and worse. They don't do their job.
Yeah, it really bothers me. I hate politicians. I ran for office for the first time in 2019, and I did it as a former police officer, public servant, seeing this madness going on, closing Rikers Island, the decarceration, bail reform, discovery reform, the diaphragm law, eliminating qualified immunity. It was one thing after another with the common goal and design of suppressing police activity, proactive policing, suppressing prosecutions, and eliminating people going to jail, decarceration. This is their whole goal. So when I saw all this happening and turning the guns on cops, attacking cops, I said, I can't sit back. I have to get involved, and I had to do this. But you're absolutely right. I mean, these politicians, it sickens me that public servants, they're public servants. They should be out there with their number one goal to protect us. And they should be focusing on that. It kills me to hear that a school, and we don't yet know if this door was unlocked and routinely unlocked, and maybe that's why he went to that door. It wasn't addressed. How do you do that? How do you leave kids in an unlocked environment, allowing someone to walk off the street and do what they will? You know, it's so, and they don't want to address that. The hardening of schools is so important. We've done it everywhere else, in banks and sensitive locations.
Joe, you just used a security term. I just want to make sure all our guests know hardening a target. Just explain that to everyone.
Yeah, well, I mean, I watched that show with Commissioner Ryder. I got to tell you, I love listening to this guy. I could listen to him all day long because he's so common sense and matter of fact, explaining everything very logically. But just to explain to the audience, hardening a target means you're dealing with to prevent people who shouldn't be in there. So access control is number one. What barriers do you have? He mentioned about putting up some obstructions to prevent cars. We see that outside of, sensitive locations where they have these hard planters that are out there. You can't ram through there. Okay, fencing. And then access control. Is there somewhere, someone there or some way that you have to get access? We can control who comes in. Then you have other issues like when you think about a bank, the plexiglass, the bulletproof glass, and you harden it and making it hard to penetrate by bad doers, people there to do harm. And it's an assessment that should be done in all of these schools to see if there are other ways. What did Patrick Ryder say? He said 2 to 3 minutes these events take place, and 3 to 5, for
the response.
So what is our goal? To slow down their access, slow down their ability to do harm, and quicken the response. So that all should be incorporated. I love what they're doing out there. And again, I'd love to listen to Patrick Ryder.
Yeah, no, I happen to agree with you. I mean, this is a problem that is solved partly through technology, but also the law. The law has to address it. And these ridiculous laws that this Governor Hochul is making. Let's stop active shooters. Let's ban body armor.
Yeah, that's the most ridiculous thing. I remember, during the summer of love with all the riots going on in 2020. My ex lives alone in a house in Queens, and there was a very delayed response during these riots. To 911 calls. It's just the rundown gets jammed up and backlogged. Her house, she has I don't want to out her, but she's got the sliding glass. It's something that could be penetrated. And if she calls 911, what is her response? So someone like her should be able to purchase body armor. She has a shotgun. She's able to defend herself, at least delay the harm that could come to her, as in Patrick Ryder's words, so that the response can catch up with them. But to say you can't own body armor, I mean, that's a defensive piece of equipment to protect you. It's not
That's terrible.
Offensive.
Joe, when they're asked by their constituents, what have you guys done about gun control? We passed 10 laws. That's all they want to say.
Right.
We passed
I
10
can't
new
stand
things,
that. They don't want to enforce the laws we have, and they're making more laws. You're not going to legislate our way out of this issue. It's just not going to come through legislation. It's going to come through being more involved. And like we said, doing this assessment, implementing certain things like that that Vadar or whatever he called it.
Ravac.
Ravac.
No, why can't the politicians? This is going on 3-4 weeks. They're shooting, right? It's 3-4 weeks now. We're in the past. Why can't they get together on that? That's something. It's an app. You download it onto a cell phone. You make a coordinated plan with the local police department. He brought up so many other good things that the officers that are going to patrol a sector and have a school, they should go into the school several times during their tour or several times a week and go in and walk through and know where the classrooms are, know where the entrances are, know where he pointed out so many good things. Why can't they do the simple things? Forget the gun laws and all of that. Get this RAVAP thing tomorrow. That should be done tomorrow, where you'd have communication from a person that is hitting that button and is saying there's an active shooter or whatever the threat is, and you can speed up response time. If a cop is taking a report for a petty larceny in a supermarket, let's say, and he gets that RAVAP notice and he's a block from the school, he's there. You know, the response time, you know, if it's just a call, a 911, and, you know, he's writing the report and maybe doesn't pay attention, but that thing is going to give an alert to his phone. So that's something that really, that should be, come on, guys, Democrat and Republican, get together on that at least.
That's a no-brainer.
Okie dokie 7. What average person needs body armor?
No.
I call BS. Well, you know something? As they take away and chip away at all your rights, that's one other thing that is, why not? Why shouldn't an honest citizen be able to own body armor for his own protection?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't he?
Small businesses, they carry cash. They got to go to the bank. They shouldn't be allowed to carry a bulletproof vest in case somebody tries to rob them. Maybe they're not armed, so they want to have a bulletproof vest. Or a courier that carries jewelry, or restaurant bounces, or bars. Or, I mean, there's all these different incidents that go on in Manhattan. Every day there's people getting their watches ripped off their arm while they're having dinner in Manhattan. So, and shot. So why not have the opportunity to own a bulletproof vest? They are quite expensive, but that's a ridiculous thing. That is a ridiculous
Phil,
thing.
I wish I had saved this video. There was a video in California where a perp was on the highway trying to flee the police, and he had a female accomplice was driving, and he's out the window banging it out with the police. And I was just like, this looks like the 1930s, like, the old Elliot Ness movies with, Al Capone and everything.
Yeah.
This guy's banging it out with the police on the highway with a semi-automatic weapon. I'm like, why is this? It's happening because the district attorneys in those jurisdictions refuse to prosecute these perps, and he's there and then finally the police had enough and they pulled up alongside him and they just 50 calibered him, and yeah,
but how dangerous is that? There's no deterrence in the society we live in today. Joe, did you see the video from outside of the 81st precinct from a few days ago where there's a video camera from the parking lot of the precinct and a few guys are outside and all of a sudden they whip out guns and they're leaning on patrol cars, shooting it out with one another. I mean, it's the Wild West on the streets of Brooklyn, unfortunately, in the 81st
Phil, that's the New York version. We had the California version. You got the New York version. There's a couple of videos online where a guy in Brooklyn during the day just is banging it out on the street in the daytime.
Yes, they're firing shots. Everybody's carrying, even though we have the toughest gun laws in the country in New York City, but yet everybody's carrying guns. They're whipping them out. And Hochul and the rest of the politicians are worried about micro-encrypting bullets and taking away body armor.
Yeah, well, that is so asinine.
Body armor going shopping for groceries on, in a shopping district that they're pulling out guns and firing shots. Grandma needs a bulletproof vest.
This comes down to that criminological, philosophy of selective incapacitation, where, I don't remember the exact numbers, but 80% of the crime is committed by 20% of the population. You take that 20% and remove them out of the population, 80% of the crime will go away. Yeah. That is a fact. That is an absolute fact.
Well, Joe, there's another concept.
Reform is what happened with bail reform. People are getting arrested. They're getting arrested for gun charges, and they're being put right back out into population where they used to be kept in. And now they're committing more crimes and additional crimes, and they're still not sentencing them. They're not giving them state time. It's horrible. But that's what we need to do. We need to target these individuals who have demonstrated they don't want to live within the laws of our society. Now we need to remove them from society. And it works. It's worked all over the country. You know,
Bill, doesn't it sound like he's describing what we went through in the 80s and 90s?
Yes, and you know the
targeting
lower
the bad
level,
guys and bringing the crime down.
the lower level of that is something called specific and general deterrence.
Right.
And specific deterrence, basically, I'll make it very simple. If you do an armed robbery of a store and you get caught, you're going to do 5 to 15. That sends a message to the general deterrent guy. I'm not going to do a stick up because this guy they specifically tailored that sentence to someone with a gun that does a stick. But then you got a district attorney that wanted to make robbery first degree in New York City a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor. I cringe. That's like, it's time for me to get out of the state. That I cannot believe anyone could say that that's okay.
Yeah, but that you're exactly right, because that totally deflates the whole possibility of deterrence when you don't have continuity and people see that, oh, that rule really doesn't apply. It's not strictly enforced. It's not deterring anyone. So I agree with you 100%. In order to have that deterrence, you need to demonstrate. You get caught with a gun, minimum 3.5. You're a predicate felon, 5 years. You're a violent predicate felon, 7 years. And we're going to remove these people from society. The heck with all these progressives that talk about, oh, they're not really criminals. They need to be held and hugged and coddled. And
Joe,
nursed
when I was teaching criminal justice, I used to every once in a while teach a course on corrections, which I hated. I hated because it glorified the prisoners, like actually glorified them, this book. And one of the things it said, which I cringed at also, was like, the definitions of career in the correctional field are all wrong. If someone commits 3 felonies in 10 years, that doesn't mean they're a career criminal. If you had 3 jobs in 10 years, is that a career? I was just like, I cannot believe this person that wrote this book just compared John Q. Citizen having 3 jobs in 10 years to a career of a criminal committing felonies as the same thing. And I was like,
well, Bill, it misses the obvious factor. You're talking about they got caught and convicted 3 times within 10 years, not that they only committed 3 crimes in 10 years.
Right,
You know,
right,
there's a
Joe.
Big difference. Big difference.
Big difference.
Yeah, we used to say the 10-to-1 rule. For every one they got caught for, they did 10 that they got away with, right?
They got away.
Good number,
Yeah,
right
they
there.
got
That's
away.
good percentages. But Joe, I want to point out something that happened to me in one of the homicide cases I worked on, and it specifically goes to career criminals. I locked up a guy for a homicide, and during the time when we were interrogating him, he was found with he got shot too. He was found with the holster and he had bullets in his pocket. He had dumped a gun. But when I tried to talk to him, he said, listen, man, he goes, I'm a predicate felon. I can't give you a statement because I'll be facing 15 years just on the gun alone. So right there, that's telling you, that's the deterrence of, having predicate felons.
It's in his head. Damn, if I get caught, I'm facing 15 as a minimum, 15 to life, probably. You know?
He was a predicate felon, and all those predicate statues are gone now. He was a predicate felon at the time. He knew he was walking around carrying a gun. He gets into a beef, winds up shooting it out with a guy, and the guy gets killed, and blah, blah, blah. But he knew he couldn't talk to the police because of his predicate felon status. First thing he said to me when I wanted to try and talk to him, no good, no statement out of him because he knew, and he wound up going to jail. He went to jail for whatever period of time, a long period of time. But the bottom line is that deterrence was right there in his mind, right up front.
Exactly.
100%. Folks, I want to thank everyone for coming by tonight. And there's a lot of emotion to this case, obviously, and we're not immune to that emotion either. And I see the venom and the anger coming out of the chat from a lot of you. And I don't disagree with you. I think there was many things done incorrectly in this case. And we're not here to protect or defend or whatever. We're here to shine a light on it and to hopefully report on this so that maybe this won't, we're not going to prevent it from ever happening again, but pointing out some of the things that went wrong here. Joe, you got any last words?
Yeah, I just, want to say to people, just think about what really happened here. People assume who the bad guy is. He's got a sign on him, bad guy, and when you're entering a scene like that and you're hearing voices, people yelling directions, you don't know who anyone is. So, just to assume and say they were cowards, they were afraid, they were this, they were that, I think it's unfair, it's unnecessary. And if you were in a situation like that, you would see how real it is. And you don't know where the threat is. You don't know where, who the enemy is, who the good guys are. So it's a very difficult, chaotic situation. Certainly, there were a lot of failures and breakdowns that need to be addressed. But I hope people will refrain from the constant attack of the police. The police have taken a beating over the years, and they still go out there and put that shield and gun on and do their job. So I just ask for people to just take a second to pause and think about, what I usually do is I try to slow things down. Take it step by step. Don't automatically assume, oh, the shooter's here. Think about when you're approaching this and the first person to come down the hallway, who may be a teacher, what's your reaction going to be? You're just going to blast them? I mean, you got to slow things down and try to work it through logically, So that would be my advice to people.
Andy the Gabby Cabby, thank you for the 5 pounds, brother. Good to see you. 5 pounds. That's funny, right? But thank you anyway. Thank you for the 5 pounds. Phil.
Last words. I just want to mention over the weekend in LA County, the El Monte Police Department, 2 hero police officers were killed last week. Corporal Michael Paredes, 22-year veteran, left a wife, two children, a daughter and a son. And Officer Joseph Santana, who was a rookie police officer with less than a year in a job, left a wife, 3 kids, a daughter and twin sons. Just a horrible situation. They were responding to a domestic violence call at a hotel. They were met with gunfire. They lost their lives. I believe the perpetrator was killed as well, but unfortunately, they lost their lives and their families, and God bless them and God bless their families. Just thought it was worth mentioning. There was a memorial over the weekend for them.
Absolutely. Folks, thanks for tuning in. This is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a great night and stay safe.
Stay safe, everyone.
Good night.
One episode just ain't enough.